Yeah, and I can just run down the list real quick for you if that's helpful.
Please.
So we have Adam Norris, Brian Kidney, Chester Moyer, James Nail, John Perkins, Kara Hirschberger, Kristen Ayers, and Mark Tomaperry, and Zach Walker.
Thank you very much, Becky.
You're welcome.
Are we all ready to go, people? I call the meeting to order. It's 1:30, July 17. Becky just did a roll call. Thank you very much, Becky. Approval of the minutes, June 12, 2020. Mr. Perkins, Mr. Hobart, even though you weren't here, have you had a chance to take a look at the minutes?
I have. They seem to look fine to me unless any objections.
Okay, then I'm going to show that we have approved the minutes. Next on our agenda is the monthly financial and operating reports, but Mr. Kidney, I'm sorry, but you have to wait. Mr. Perkins has to leave early today, and I really wanted him to hear the IPL audit. And so if Mr. Tomaperry, could you go ahead and do your IPL audit, and we'll get that done, and then Mr. Kidney will come back to you, okay?
That's fine. Becky, if you give me control of the...
Yeah, I'll give you some presenter privileges. Give me just a second, Mark.
Mm-hmm. Okay, can everybody see my screen? You should see a title page for the report. Okay, so we'll get started here. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this opportunity to present this audit report for you. Let's just dive right in and get going. This audit was originally set up in August 20, 2019. It's in the full statement of the what the committee recommended is on page 50 in the report. One of the things that, as I look back and collected some of my thoughts about why we started this with this audit, stood out for me from this report from the citizen survey, where there was such a dichotomized way that the citizens were looking at the way IPL was in the community. They liked the reliability, but not the cost. At the time we began, the audit council had already begun to respond to the cost factor with the rate reductions. But given the management turnover, I think Brenda had just left a couple of months previous. Obviously council thought it was time to begin to address the management issues. So we came up with this scope statement. The objective really follows a management approach that focuses on defining and then achieving the results that are important to governments. The organization that's going through this process develops a shared, widely understood framework using performance measurement for setting goals and objectives, managing, allocating resources, and evaluating its accomplishments. Managing results can benefit by improving the focus on key results and sharpening the organization's management skills to achieve those results. And bottom line is it's a tool for more responsive and accountable government. So focusing on the efficiency and the effectiveness by looking and compiling data on costs and performance metrics to begin to look at the improvements. The report itself is broken into 4 different categories: the activity budget and performance metrics, then the findings and recommendations, the audit responses from department, city manager, and then the appendix has the committee minutes and committee responses. The report includes these IPL divisions. A few months into the audit, it became apparent that the scope of the audit, including the whole department, was too broad. And so we decided to focus on the primary functions of energy production, energy procurement, transmission, and distribution. Support services such as meter reading, vehicle maintenance, while mission critical were slotted into a phase 2. These activities comprise nearly 2/3 of IPL operations and maintenance. The budget itself that is adopted by council every year is a program-based budget where there is information provided. It's a very high-level overview of city programs and services. A lot of the costs are rolled up. You're looking at, in this instance, you're looking at over 60 people combined in this budget. And you're just talking about this is what transmission and distribution does, that division of IPL. So what I did in my approach was look at a activity budget. An activity budget provides more detail, and it better applies the concept of the managing for results. It allows you to do a deeper dive into the cost of the activities that are performed in order to compile the data on a performance measure basis and to report current service levels. As you can see from this chart, I identified 11 distinct activities within the transmission and distribution division. So instead of just the 14 million that you saw on the first page, this breaks it down into 11 separate little budgets, if you will. Then each of those activities was analyzed in this fashion. The baseline budget was developed using the FY20 program budget. In this example, you can see that the overhead activity has 15.8 FTEs or full-time equivalents. Superintendent costs are spread among all of the activities to which he is assigned. So you get the 0.8 in for the overhead function. As is the case with most of the IPL activities, this is a very, very labor-intensive activity, as more than 93% of the costs are allocated to salary, benefits, and overtime. Then, looking at the chart on the right, you can see the work order data and the amount of time spent on the various tasks performed by the lineman. So within transmission and distribution, that whole function, you have the overhead line maintenance activity, which has 15.8 people. It costs 2.9 million, and it includes primarily four work order types: the overhead lines, conductors and devices, poles and fixtures, and then taking the old stuff off. And then there's miscellaneous things performed by these personnel as well. As we walk through, as I did that for each of those activities and each of those divisions that I talked about before, the bottom line is that we came up with costs that could be benchmarked across either trend analysis, using trend analysis, or benchmarking with other jurisdictions. So once we understood what those current service levels were, how much services cost, then we could come up with these kinds of metrics so that we could then compare them across time. So for each, you can see that I outlined a few of these, many more buried within the actual text of the document. But identifying cost per position, cost per mile, really enables you to find a partner. There's always been a lot of talk about finding another municipally owned utility to partner up with, perhaps. But then you could go to those your partners and talk about efficiencies based on, okay, what's it cost you per position? Doesn't matter how many miles necessarily, because you could begin to identify, well, we've got this many miles of overhead line, and it costs us this much per line. So kind of in summary, before we turn our attention to the findings and recommendations, I think what we do find with an activity budget, with the performance metrics, that enables us to do the analysis, to look at return on investment, to do some benchmarking. Can we do it faster, cheaper, with better quality? Is it more cost effective to contract? To ask those kinds of questions. One note, I should also say that I didn't fully flesh out all the performance metrics here because of the management services RFQ that was issued during the audit, and then the subsequent hiring in April of DKMT Consulting. It's anticipated that they will do a lot more of the performance metrics work. Any questions about that before we kind of move on to findings and recommendations? Now, I apologize if I'm going a little fast. I'm trying to make sure we get through this for John's purposes.
I don't have any questions.
All right. Moving then to the findings and recommendations. There are five primary recommendations, five primary findings, from the report. I found that while the electric industry has radically changed in the 21st century, IPO still functions with a 20th century mindset and toolbox. The culture is steeped in tradition that is able to provide a reliable stream of electricity to its customers, which is the name of the game. Reliability is what it's all about. But that reliability comes at a high price. Innovations have begun with the introduction of modern technology, new financials, payroll, work order systems. But the challenge ahead is learning how to use these new tools to transform the way that services are delivered with no decrease in reliability. The challenge ahead is to identify best practices and infuse the culture with those practices to provide reliable service at a cheaper cost to the consumer. So each of these findings, then we go into the recommendations. And Madam Chair, I didn't plan to sit here and read the slides to you. I don't think that's necessary. What I thought was I could make a couple of comments, and then if anybody else wanted to ask questions or begin, really, we could begin a conversation as well. I don't know how you wanted to bring in, if you wanted to wait till the end and then have city manager and the general manager for IPO talk about their responses and everything. Or...
Well, I mean, I assume you got their responses and you considered them. I mean, I guess after you present, if they would like to bring something back up, perhaps they still disagree with you on something. I think that would be appropriate. But why don't we let you finish first? And then if somebody wants to chime in, that'd be fine. I'm mostly, I'd like to know if you can let us know what the major problems are and what your recommendation it would be to perhaps address these problems. And perhaps that's really the question should be put forth to the city manager. I assume that the management company is going to be presented with a copy of this report. And Mr. Toma Perry, I don't know if you were planning on making a presentation to the PUAB or not, but I think that's probably appropriate also. And so I'm thinking we're not going to have a conclusion at the end of 1 hour. I think, IPL is a very big elephant, and it's going to take a lot of thought and a lot of careful movement to move us forward. So I see this as the start of a good conversation.
Very well. I'll walk through these slides and hit the highlights, and like you said, try to point out the ones that I think are the ones that I found most compelling.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Most of the findings, most of the recommendations come from finding one. And frankly, it's where I spent a lot of my time piecing together a database that included 3 different systems in order to begin looking at timekeeping, payroll, and work orders in one, in one database.
And they're 3 different systems and they don't talk to each other?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
But we're in the process, and that's one of the things to mention is that is in process, and it is working and is beginning to have an impact. So, in another year or two, these systems would all be implemented, and a lot of these issues, I think, will be behind us if care is taken to fully implement. And that is part of the things I wanted to point out here. The payroll system and the financial system, like you said, have been implemented. This recommendation 1 on the timekeeping system, what that will do is enable a lot of the paper pushing and the using Excel or Word or emailing things around, things like that for all the accountability checks and everything. That should all be done within the system and improve productivity. So for 1 and 2, the department's already reported for number 2 that they have made some changes. I had talked about the fact that payroll sheets were amended, were altered, and you couldn't see who was doing that or why it was being done. So Mr. Nail has pointed out that they have reached out to try to make some improvements for recommendation number 2.
And if I could interrupt.
Sure.
I'm sorry. So that has been accomplished, Mr. Nail?
This is Jim. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. That's one of the things that's in progress, and we are training the different supervisors in how to make sure their payroll is accurately reflected. One of the issues that Mark had noted is the process is very manual. A lot of different people touch it. So what I've told them is, and if you need to make a correction, just initial it and make a note at the bottom of what the change was for. That way we can track everything without a whole bunch of copies of emails and phone calls and all the rest.
And okay, so is it possible for the timesheets, they're still manually created?
They are. The work crew leaders fill out the timesheets for 3 or 4 or 5 of them, depending on how big the crew is. They're all on the timesheet. The crew leader fills it out and broken down by all the different FERC accounting rules, which are extremely complicated. And then that's turned into the superintendents who forward it to the timekeeper.
And the last line of the analysis is the one that concerns me. The payroll record does not always match the timesheet. And as I understand what you're saying, what we are doing right now, we're in the process of making sure that they will match the timesheets.
Well, another complication is that if you work on 3 different work orders, that's going to be reflected on 3 separate timesheets for each crew. So sometimes it may be a matter of the timekeeper is trying to combine all 3 of those into one and then make sure they account for all 8 hours. If they come up where a crew leader did a math error and didn't capture it all, then there's a phone call or an email to get that straightened out. Timekeeper will make the correction. And I know one of the timekeepers, she does all of hers by email. So she always has an email trail of any discussions back and forth with the superintendent.
So we don't have a computer program that does this for us?
No, ma'am, we don't.
Do we have the capability to have a computer program that would do it for us?
It's contemplated. Well, when what's in process right now, Mr. Kidney could step in and say what we're at, and we're going to discuss that later on the agenda, where we're at with the Munis implementation. The executive time.
Okay, so this
timekeeping
is a
system.
Munis problem again. Okay,
It's executive
Okay,
time is
Munis.
part of the Munis. It's part of the Munis
Okay.
system, and it will eliminate all the paper pushing and email.
okay,
tracking
thank you,
and things
Mr.
like
Thomas
that.
Derrick. Thank you. Okay, I'll be quiet. Go ahead.
Then lastly, on this page, we talk about the Fair Labor Standards Act. In the analysis I've done over the last 4 years and done over the past few months, I've estimated that a third of overtime citywide could be eliminated by moving to these overtime rules, which at its simplest form would say you have to work your 40 hours before we begin to pay you overtime. Right now, and within the new IDEW contract, it again reemphasizes that it's scheduled time that is counted and not time worked before overtime gets paid. And the manager has
So it'll be
agreed. Pardon?
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, the manager has indicated he's looking into this as well. And it's something that we should probably get in to continue to explore.
We just did a IDEW contract last time. And this was in that contract, so we can't modify it absent agreement for 2 years, right? Is that the same contract we're talking about? The city manager shaking his head, yes.
Madam Chair, this is Adam Norris. If I could just add,
Yes.
if memory
Please.
serves, I think at this point in time, I have negotiated or in the process of negotiating all of our 7 work agreements. And this 8-hour provision, memory serves, is in all of them except with the firefighters who have that a different kind of shift. So this would be something that we would need to negotiate with all work groups. And as Mr. Toma Perry mentioned, this would be a significant impact to the city financially. It'd be a significant cost savings as well as impact employees.
So this would be a citywide shift, is what you're saying?
We would need to negotiate this provision in virtually all our work agreements going forward.
Okay,
Madam Chair,
good to know. Yes, sir.
just so I have an understanding of the overtime policy that we're looking at for the fair labor standards. If in a 40-hour week, say I take an 8-hour personal holiday, that brings me to 32 actual work hours. I get call in for whatever reason, but before I get the overtime pay, I gotta have that 8 hours made up in actual work before that at hour 41, that time and a half kicks in. Is that my understanding?
Yes.
Okay. So, okay.
So as it stands right now with the contract language, if someone works 4 days a week, 32 hours, and then takes 1 vacation day, but ends up working 2 hours of over.
All right, Adam, you're completely breaking up, buddy.
Yeah. I thought it was me, but yeah, he is. Can you answer
Right,
that,
so-
Zach?
Adam, I think what you were saying was, right now, if you work you work any time of vacation or sick leave or personal leave, that we go ahead and pay on the 40. Once you're scheduled for 40 and you go ahead and work that 2 hours on Saturday, you're paid that instead of, like John was saying, working up until you get to your 40 before we begin paying the overtime.
Now, speaking about IPL specifically, do we have a lot of instances where we have guys on vacation and something happens, we got to pull them off for emergencies. I mean, is this a typical thing that happens often?
This is Jim. No, we don't typically, it's very rare that someone would get called in if they've taken a day off or a day of vacation. But what does happen is, let's say they work Monday through Thursday and they take Friday off as just one day off. They may get called on Saturday as part of a crew to come in, and if like a down tree or a pole gets hit, and that would be overtime, even though they only work 32 hours.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Toma Perry.
Okay, then moving to recommendation 4, still kind of continuing on the overtime. Another cost savings, another efficiency would be to eliminate all overtime unless it's an emergency. And that can be, obviously when you're dealing with electricity, emergency can cover a wide variety of things. But my analysis showed that there were a lot of things that did not appear to fall into the emergency category, where there was work scheduled to be done over the weekend that could have been done, apparently, from my perspective, during the weekday or without overtime. Not knowing not being able to go back and recreate everything that went into the scheduling of that overtime. Obviously, I'm going to be wrong some of the times on some of those instances from just looking at data. But going forward, making it the policy to say, let's not schedule overtime work. Let's do overtime when there are emergencies. Obviously, storm recovery, anything like that is what we're aiming for, and where we have no issue at all with getting people out there and working on overtime. But it's a scheduling, really, that gets at the heart of this. Let's see, number 5. What I'm talking about on the inclement weather policy is that's very well defined within the labor agreement. What I'm more concerned about with this recommendation is what happens during that downtime. There were nearly 4,000 hours of inclement weather time recorded, but we don't have a record of what was done on those 4,000 hours. Was there training done? Anecdotally, they were trained and they cleaned their equipment and things like that. But we don't know. We don't have a documentation. So my recommendation here is really getting at a policy that here's what would be done. Here's what the superintendent's, who is making the recommendation, who is following through, et cetera. And then on the sick leave, the abuse that I'm talking about, and that may be a poorly chosen word here. It's more the policy of allowing employees to use sick leave when it looks like they might have in the report I reference, maybe coming off a rest period or having to fill up 2 hours on their timesheet because they had 6 hours of rest period or something like that. And they'd fill it in with sick leave, which just seems that's the abuse of putting it down as sick leave. I can understand where they would want to take some personal time off, but categorizing it as sick leave, I think, is not the right thing to do.
Can you tell me what you mean by that? Give me an example. Like,
let's say
if I'm supposed to work 8 hours.
Yeah, and you get called in the night before. Somebody hits a pole. So you call an emergency crew in. They come in. I forget the exact language in the agreement, but if you work a certain number of hours, you are entitled to a rest period. So you work 6 hours during the night, you're not going to be asked to work a full day on the next day. So you're given those 6 hours. So there's going to be 2 hours of your normal work day that you could work. You could come in and work those 2 hours. And a lot of times it looks like, from looking at the records, where people would just take personal leave. And that could be vacation
Okay,
time,
so-
it could be personal business, or a lot of times people use sick leave.
So if I'm scheduled to work on Monday morning at 8 a.m., but I'm called in Sunday and I work Sunday 6 hours, Monday, I'm only obligated to work 2 hours. Is that what you're saying? And instead of me working those 2 hours, I'll just call in sick for 2 hours. Is that what you're saying?
That's probably oversimplified.
Well, yeah.
It is very well laid out and structured within the agreement. If you are, you have this many hours within your call-in time, your regular start time, and things like that. So it's more, I'd say it's more of a weekday sort of situation. And they're out on the
So
job.
is this in their contract too?
Yes.
Okay, all right, gotcha.
The rest period, I didn't find any fault with the rest period. It was how the next day was dealt with, how that time was, the allowing the use of sick leave on days like that was where I had the issue.
Got it.
And then 7 through 10 really kind of gets back to the systems that I think we need to really make sure that we keep using the phrase get full functionality. We are using CityWorks, and I used a lot of the data. There's a ton of data that I was able to use, but there are fields within there where they just default to, they have default settings where you can't go in and say, okay, here's what time it was entered. Here's the, who was doing all the work. Was this storm recovery work? What kind of work was it? So there's a whole lot of functionality for the actual job that's being done that could be included when filling out the CityWorks, the actual work order. Recommendation 8, I think, that was a big one for me. The unaccounted for time, where I found a third of the time within transmission and distribution that we have no record of what was done, what asset was worked on, where they were at. And Jim probably wants to get into more of this later on, but there is quite a bit of running around, quote unquote, as the day goes through, as you work through the day. What I'm trying to emphasize is that we keep track, and with the new technology, we'll be better able to do that. We keep track of what we're doing, what we're touching, so that we know. Talk about in finding number 5, we know what assets have been, what we've done to assets, and we've got a full and complete record of that. And then making sure that they're interfaced. Right now, when we went into the CityWorks had already been heavily invested in, so we made the decision when we were bringing in Munis not to include their work order and inventory modules, so that we always planned on doing the interfaces. That got delayed and it got expanded with the new billing system, the utility billing system, which that should be on this list as well. That's a mistake I made. So this is just saying, we need to make sure that all those are interfaced and talking to each other.
Okay, and those are the bridges the outside auditors talked about, right? We need to build a bridge between Munis and, for example, the City Works.
Yes, I'm trying to remember what they specifically were referencing, and I think it was
I just
the
seem to
utility
remember them
building.
talking about bridges. Yeah, it was utility building,
Okay.
general ledger and utility building and customer deposits and yeah. Okay, it's a bridge. Gotcha.
Okay, then moving on to finding 2, which I think this may be, well, if not the highest thing on my list, the second one. Current practices tip the scales toward labor in this, in terms of the labor management relationship. What I saw from the department responses, most of the time, the impact on the contract is how the answer was framed, which is good. We want to keep that contract firmly in focus and make sure that we are adhering to the letter of the law. It is my finding that we do not, on the management side, we do not balance the scales with that. We need to have these kinds of policies in place to help our managers balance the scale, make sure that, that we're not running our shops according to the way labor says we will, but we've worked it out and we've got our policies, and those policies are implementing the agreement that we've made with IBEW in this case. So when I talked with the superintendents, I asked them for, where's the documentation for how do you do work assignments? And it's just the way we were taught. So those are the things that need to be tightened up, and just what are the standard operating procedures and things of those nature.
Okay.
I think bringing this relationship just needs to be brought back into balance.
Mr. Hobart has a question.
I know it's, you said this is a smaller part of your report, but I need to know what it is. What's the city council call for service?
There were, during my interviews, as we were talking about how work assignments were made, there were references made to responding to the city council calling in and asking for things to be done.
Any specifics on whether that's for the public or for personal use?
No specifics. If I had to guess, I would just say it was part of the responding to a citizen request, or something had been brought to their attention. They were trying to get it done, customer or constituent services sort of thing. Which is fine. The constituents should be bringing those things forward, but it should go into the queue, and it should have, again, right? Should council, when the council puts in a request, should those get a higher ranking? Should those be attended to first, or so those are the kind that be getting into the policy that should be developed.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm not saying that was the case, or it was a factor during the conversations that came up, and that was just one of the things that was out there. All right, finding 3 is really not a finding as much as examples that begin to scratch the surface of what would be potential for cost saving opportunities. I'm sure the DKMT will come up with numerous examples that go far beyond this. But one point of emphasis here is that we shouldn't lose the focus on electrical liability, so that if we start talking about outsourcing, we need to make sure that reliability is at the heart of everything we do. But on the other hand, are these core services? So what are the core services that we need to be doing? Is there a way that we could shed things like streetlight maintenance or private outdoor lighting? It does a streetlight maintenance. Do we need a fully licensed, fully trained journeyman lineman to go replace a streetlight bulb? Could that be done a different way? So that's the spirit of finding three here. Is there a different way? The trouble man function. I threw this out as an example of a way to re-look at how we are doing things within our service delivery. So that's the spirit on these is, well, what's a different way? Is there a different way? Finding four, the work agreement that was approved earlier this month sheds a little bit more light on this. But what I found is it's mainly as a guide for the decommissioning and the RIF process going on with Blue Valley. I think what I'm still saying here that we should take a second look at how that budget was put together. Now that we know who is staying, who's taken severance, we're a little bit closer to seeing who is going to move into the four additional positions that are available, and then who's going to take the remaining severance packages, those sorts of things. What I think council should begin to see is more of a current personnel roster and costs. Maybe an idea of how the overtime will be used that's budgeted, if it will be used. There's $720,000 for maintenance. How is that going to be allocated? How does that fit in with the overall strategy of looking at which CTs we're going to keep functioning, going back to the master plan report from a few years ago. And then finally, pardon me?
Chair, Adam, can you hear me?
Yeah, Adam.
Okay. I just want to touch on this a little bit, and I don't think Mr. Toma Perry or management are in disagreement here. And in fact, the work agreement that we negotiated contemplates this kind of evolution over the next 18 months in regard to the CTs. This was a significant point of discussion with the union, and they worked with us very well in developing kind of a cross-training program to make that production division more nimble and agile and flexible and lean over time. But I think it is an operation that we need to learn over the next 12 months, 18 months. And that is built into the contract language as it stands right now. Hopefully everything okay.
I was just going to say, I'd like to see how I think it's essential for council to kind of see how that's evolving and moving forward. Then finally, finding five. I wanted to make sure that I included some thoughts on future, on return on investment, sorts of investments. I couldn't really, didn't have enough records to really determine labor costs or replacing equipment during outages, that were caused by the failures and decay. But common sense tells me that it's going to cost us more to do them during outages than then with a kind of a systematic and programmed equipment replacement program. And this is where I kind of come back to the unaccounted for time and the unaccounted for asset information is, how much, if we don't know when we're going out and doing a quick fix on a piece of asset, equipment asset, how is that playing into the equipment failures? Is it decaying or, so looking at, is 9%, I don't know if 9% is good or bad or indifferent. When I researched it, it was kind of all over the place. So I would hope that maybe DCAMT or somebody would be able to go back and look and see are we investing enough? Are we doing it by best practice? And then finally, the full inventory of all the assets. Do we know, when do we know what we have, what condition it's in? Just kind of the backup detail, and Adam indicated that we had all the backup information for what was reported in the CAFR, so that would be good to look at. So, Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation.
Well,
And
thank you very much.
Like to...
I will first ask Mr. Perkins if he has any questions. It's a lot of information, and but I just wondered, John, if you had any questions right now.
Mark, talking about the CTUs, that's been a point of discussion of the future of our IPL and what makes the best sense to have those, not to have those. Just from your analytic mind here, what's your gut reaction to keeping them functioning and keeping the maintenance running on them and keeping the personnel there going for them?
I think following the master plan is the right. I think the path you're on, following the master plan, is the right path. As I analyze the need for staff, that's very complicated, sort of picture. You could go through doing the data analysis that I did and make a case that we don't have to spend as much time on those units as we did with the big units out at Blue Valley. So that drives a less need for people. Adam makes a good point with the negotiation. How do you go through that decommissioning process? How do you deal with people is a critical piece. And I don't envy the amount of time that he spent negotiating that. So I guess I'm kind of saying, yeah, we're on the right course. Let's make sure that we are we can save every penny we can while we're implementing that over the next year or two.
Okay. That was my point of concern, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hobart, you're new to the game, but do you have any questions now for Mr. Timothy?
What are the three systems that you mentioned earlier that are used for timekeeping or payroll? Is that software?
Yeah, right now what we have, we just came off for payroll purposes. In January, we replaced an old mainframe system with a system from Tyler Technologies called Munis. And we have implemented, prior to that, the financials piece on that. So there are three key pieces to that new back office functionality: the financials, the payroll, and HR, the recruiting, hiring, recruiting, things like that. But then also the timekeeping, and the timekeeping has proved to be with 7 different work agreements and having to set up infinite number of relationships. That has just taken, that's a tough nut to crack, and still working on cracking it.
So the main parts, the three main parts, are those implemented and working?
We've got an agenda item later on to talk about where we're at with that implementation. So we might defer to that.
And that's next.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr. Hobart? No? Mr. Tomaperi, have you been contacted, or do you plan on speaking with the management team we've hired and presenting them with the report and all your information, which is certainly a lot? And if you haven't done it, would you please do it?
I have not been asked or anything, but yes, I'd be happy to initiate that.
Well, I just
And
think
work with-
the more information that team gets, the better for the cities. So they can read it and they'll understand it fairly quickly, and it may help them, and maybe it's not necessary, but it certainly won't take much time. So I'd appreciate it if you at least make the offer. And also, I think the PUAB probably would like to see this, have you make your presentation there also. So perhaps after this meeting's over, you and Mr. Norris can talk and maybe schedule something for them.
Yeah, I think they had their regular scheduled meeting yesterday. So maybe we could get on the agenda for their August meeting.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, sir. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Did you wanna-
I was
Were you
just about
gonna-
to say, when we started, I mentioned that perhaps like the department or the city manager's office would like to make some type of a response to your presentation. So first I'll ask Mr. Norris if there's anything he'd like to address.
Can you hear me okay? I'm just double checking
Yes.
again. All right.
Yes.
I think we drafted a pretty comprehensive response in addition to the department. And I know that we have outside folks that have joined the call that are waiting to talk, and their time is valuable. I might suggest that we can come back at another meeting, or we can send you our responses to what that we sent to Mr. Tomaperi to the committee. We'd be happy to do that, however you want to do it. But we're happy to keep the meeting moving forward and
Okay.
respect everyone else.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Tomaperi gave us your responses.
Yes, those are included in the.
They're included already, Adam. I wanted you to know that. So Mr. City Manager is sitting here with me, and he's shaking his head yes. So I'm going to go ahead and close this topic right now and thank Mr. Tomaperi first, and second, ask Mr. Chester Moyer. Sir, I'm sorry to have kept you waiting. Can you give us your report?
Yes. Hi, Madam Chair. This is Chester. And
Hi, Chester.
hi, thanks. Yeah, I'm your audit partner for your external audit. And I also have with me Kara Hirschberger, who's also serves the city. And we issued your audit in May, as you know, for the June 30, 2019 year end. And it included comments in our management letter about the implementation of Munis. And we've been in discussions with management about the progress of those corrective actions. And we've been asked to join today basically to provide a perspective on their planned responses and provide some context around timing or other underlying risks that might be associated with implementing the Munis modules that we've already begun to talk about today. So that's the purpose of me being here, is to provide support, I guess, or perspective, along with Kara, who has turned her video on now. So really, I'd leave it to you, Madam Chair, and to Brian Kidney, perhaps to continue with what you desire from the Munis implementation standpoint, and I can fill in the gaps.
Sounds Brian. Okay, Mr. Kidney, you're on finally. Did I lose you? He left.
No,
He's back.
no, ma'am. You didn't lose me. So, Becky, thank you. So Becky has given me control here. Which one of these do you want to go over first? The presentation on the financial documents, or
Munis, or I want to build a bridge, Brian. Let's talk Munis.
Want to build a bridge? Very good. So I prepared just a small presentation here, and at any time, just go ahead and stop me and for any questions you might have about this. I do want to thank Chester and Kara for being on here. Chester was so nice to note the inefficiencies that we had with our software implementation, and so it's been a pleasure working with Chester on reviews. Specifically, he did help us go through and update our purchasing policy, which was also part of those comments. But also Kara is on here. Kara has worked with us before. In fact, I worked with her on internal audit. So one thing that she did for us early on, right when I came on board, was do a post-implementation audit of our procurement software. So she does have experience with this, and so I appreciate her hopping on here also. And then, of course, Cindy Gray is on here also. She's your CFO, Deputy Finance Director, CFO, and she has been in charge of a lot of these projects. So I'm going to be relying on her quite a bit for any kind of updated question. So I did go through, and I'm not going to spend much time on this, but I did go back and find the original presentation for the software, and just this talks about the core project, the goals, and the objectives. There was a lot of information here: streamlining, providing tools, enabling and empowering users, successfully overcoming current challenges and meet those goals. It's very comprehensive. And going back, looking at how past implementations that I've worked on personally, I'm kind of starting to see this in a little bit better picture. I've been in, before I came here, probably 5 or 6 major software implementations. Many times it was a court software implementation, a utility billing software implementation, a financial, a payroll, but very rarely, in fact, in my history, I have not seen such a comprehensive attempt at implementing so many modules at the same time. And so it was amazing process to go, and I could certainly understand MTP's role on this and the work that he did to get it going and everything. I do know historically, it's just when you start a process like this, you take a look. It's like, oh, it's a 12-month implementation to do XYZ software module, and it's a 18-month to do this module. And that's great, but when you're trying to do those modules at the same time, given the resources, I think that's where there was a lot of issues that came up with the implementation of that. Oh yeah, it normally would take 12 to 18 months, but we're also working on 3 other implementations at the same time. So that's just kind of headed into this. I thought I would just kind of give my perspective. It's kind of starting to get my arms around some of these issues. So what I did here is I took the original presentation again, and the targeted go live dates that were out there. So you can see there was 4 major areas. I have it broke down in 5, but just to kind of break it up a little bit. And so you can kind of see what the target date originally was. And then I have a remainder of what's left. So you'll see the chart of accounts and budget. There's 0% of that project left outstanding. I do want to point out on this one that the chart of accounts, while it's put together 100%, the way it has been put together is causing problems for some the transparency module, and then also some of the advanced reporting modules. And so in order to complete those modules, we think we're going to need to go back to the chart of accounts and do some additional work on that. So that's, again, just trying to explain and talk about, you mentioned the bridge. These are all connected together. So there's a lot of issues here. And then I'm going to go through each one of these applications a little bit more in detail on down. On the financials, the target was July of 2018. Actual was July of 2018. I would say that there's about 30% of that module the financials that are remaining. And you'll see on the side, I would say that we're 25% complete with capital assets. We're a third of the way through on cash management. I have a 0% for inventory. Mr. Toma Perry had mentioned in his previous meeting that the decision was made to pull off of inventory and do city works. And so that's why you'll see that reflected that way. 100% of accounts payable, 100% of purchasing, 100% of accounts receivable, 100% of project accounting. There's still a little cleanup to do on that, but it's being effectively used. 100% of contracts. The e-procurement software is 50%, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. And then I would say we're about 60% through on the CAFR report writer.
So is Mr. Kidney, is the cash management 33%? Is that with the general ledger and the utility deposits? Like, is that where that topic would go?
That is part of that. And I'll touch on that.
Okay.
I've got a slide that goes through. Getting the human capital management piece. You'll see the target was originally December of 2018. Go live was actually January of 2020. I will say in the middle of this, we did have a transition. Toma Perry left to go and do his new role where he's at now. And so we lost our project manager at that time. I had asked Cindy Gray to come in. She was all excited. Hey, welcome aboard. Here's all this financial stuff. Oh, by the way, can you take over being a project manager for payroll? Welcome to the city. Here you go. So she very well picked that up. She picked it up March, April of 19 and was able to complete it. We were really excited about that. I would say we're 100% complete with payroll and employee self-service. Even though we say go live January 2020, I would say that through March probably is when we had all the programming issues taken care of. Again, Toma Perry, and I'm glad he went first because he did point out some really good things here. In that it was very difficult for the implementation due to the 7 different union rules and how you put these things together to get the payroll to actually pay correctly.
Excuse me, Mr. Kidney. I know we were having trouble with the firefighters' pay, and I understand there was a little bit of a problem with the police officers' pay. Are all those issues resolved?
So I would say that those were complete in by I would say March of 2020. There are still problems with payroll, but those are not. That's your normal type of problems that you have with payroll. They're again working with 1,100 people and working with 10 to a dozen different timekeepers across the city. We'll still have people accidentally put in a wrong pay code or something. So we still get problems, but for all intents and purposes, the actual payroll, when a code is put in correctly, it is paying correctly. And to me, that's what I'm calling success.
Okay.
The human resources and talent. I'm sorry.
This is Dan Hobart. I'd like to jump in real quick.
Absolutely.
That 100% payroll, is that accurate? Because I thought we just heard that IPL can't do their timekeeping, or is that strictly payroll?
this is strictly payroll. You'll look to just to the right, there's a 0% that's called ExecuTime. And that's the time collection system. That's the automating of people's timesheets. So you'll see that at 0, that has not started. Neither has the ExecuTime Advance. And again, I'll get into that a little bit more on what that actually means. And then the recruiting module or application hasn't started yet. The next major area that we purchased performance-based budgeting. That has not started, and I need to probably have a pretty good meeting with the manager and assistant manager, talk a little bit about when we're ready to go live with performance-based budgeting. A very important part of performance-based budgeting, of course, is to make sure that everything, all the accounting pieces are tied out well. So you're not able to start a performance-based budgeting in Munis until we're all comfortable that the financial piece has been all put together. So again, talking about the payroll piece wasn't together until January of 20. It was a little bit too late to start performance-based budget for the 2021 budget process. So we'll come back and look at a timetable then for performance-based budget for the 2022 budget. Yes, I think I'm saying that right. Okay. And then there's a section that's called cross-phase. Part of this is there's a few things in here: analytics and advanced reporting. We are doing the advanced reporting, and we've started this. I don't, I'm saying 50% here because, again, some of the reporting that we're having difficulty because the way the chart of accounts was originally set up. And I think I've mentioned this before. Unfortunately, during a critical time of the implementation, you were without a finance director. And so staff kind of just used the old accounting structure that they had, and it didn't fit as well as it probably should have in the financial statement. So I think there was just this weird period of time where there was a lot of changeover happening right at the critical time. And so as a result, the old account structure kind of went in, and hindsight, I think we would have implemented a different chart of accounts. Regardless, we have some solutions. We're looking at different things. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. The citizen self-service, it shows 0%, and that basically because we have already implemented the citizen employee service through another software solution. So that is up and running and up and running really well, actually. So there is no reason to have the citizen self-service, but the Munis module. And so we're in discussions with Munis about receiving a credit back for that software. And then transparency is the last one. Usually that's the last one you do after everything else is put together. However, when we get to that slide, I'm going to talk a little bit. I think we're ready to move forward on more of it than less. So just asked me if I wanted to leave the meeting. No. So I'm breaking down the remaining financial modules, and Councilmember DeLucy, you had asked specifically the cost of a quicker implementation. So I put this together to talk a little bit about that, but hopefully it's more of a discussion if there's questions about it. Capital assets, the outstanding items on that, we're behind on getting our IPL assets caught up. Again, there was a transition there with a lot of staff. We're now back up and running fairly well. We're getting there. When that's done, then we'll need to convert the data from the old JDE system. So the items that it would take to speed the implementation up is to conduct a fixed asset inventory and not even convert the old data. And then of course I have help us reinstate the project manager. I think I have that on most of them. That is an outstanding area that, we still don't have that project management piece. So I'm actually, I think conducting a fixed asset inventory would actually be preferred. It does cost 30 to 40,000. However, we are actually, that's been recommended from our insurance brokers and then the insurance companies that we write our property insurance through are really pressuring us to get an actual inventory put together. They don't like our listings that we do have. They think our insured values are not correct. So we have to do this anyway for our risk management piece. So it really may make a lot of sense to combine that then and also do this fixed asset inventory. So we would not be converting data from the old system, new system. We would have an updated inventory and we would just bring that up. So I have a note there that we'd be able to cut this cost in half if we're able to combine it with the risk management inventory that we're going to be doing. Okay, so cash management. This is the application that was referred to as specifically about the bank reconciliation. One, the outstanding items with that is we would need to first upgrade Munis to, they have an upgrade that we need to do in order to fully go automatic with our cash management. We're not able to upgrade the accounting Munis until we coordinate with payroll and upgrade the payroll application to the same version. So that's just going to take some timing issue. And then we also need additional training. Just to go back on Chester's comments on the audit, the bank reconciliation piece of that was discussed, that is being taken care of. The comment of it's not all handled internally in the computer system, that is the piece that we're talking here. And I would estimate if we brought in just a little bit more additional assistance, if someone has some Munis experience, help that the 1 or 2 staff people that are doing their regular job plus trying to get this up and running. I would say that would cost between $5,000 and $10,000. Cindy and I met with some vendors. We're expecting a proposal. I was hoping to get one today, but we'll probably get one early next week on if that really is $5,000 to $10,000. And what that would be is for a third party to come in and help us get caught up and be able to convert all the outstanding bank reconciliation pieces and get that completely up and running. I believe also, Cindy, you might correct me if I'm wrong, I think we also need to negotiate with the bank because the data, the way they're sending the data over won't work with our system. But that's not a major deal. I don't think that's going to be a problem, but we would need to do that also. I didn't put that in here. Yes, that's correct. Okay, and then inventory work orders. Again, we mentioned that we do use CityWorks now. I do have the comment. We are working on building that bridge between the systems. We have a CityWorks team, and this is one of the projects they're working on. Unfortunately, it's not their priority right now. Their priority has been departments are asking for a lot of information on the mapping to CityWorks, but I do know they're moving forward on it. But it's not keeping us from being able to do any of our work. It's just what it would do is to bring over a journal entry for us to account for. Additional financial modules, 2 more. E-procurement, outstanding items is training, and we lost our the staff that was working on that project. We do have an open position. It's in the budget, and speeding that up is, I would just say, release the hiring freeze, and we can hire that staff to help us get that going. That should help speed it up. Budget neutral. I would say adding to that probably is some cybersecurity issues, which I'll talk about at the transparency side. We may want to wait until our cybersecurity systems is a little bit stronger. So e-procurement is up and running. So businesses do go out and they manage their procurement relationship with the city online, virtually. What e-procurement's not allowing them to do right now is going in and changing their own banking information, or saying, instead of a check, send us a wire. And we're very cautious on doing that. I was at a meeting a couple months ago, and the amount of cyber attacks for that specific process alone has more than doubled or tripled, especially in the last couple months. And so I want to be very cautious of opening that up any bit at all. We really want to be very conscious of that. So lastly, this CAFR statement builder, it's to get it going is going to take a little bit more cross training and staffing. One thing that we're looking at, we'd really like to outsource having our CAFR done by the auditor. This is, and I'm sure Cindy could probably attest to this too with her background. This is one of the first communities I've worked with that actually did the CAFR in-house. Usually your auditor, you contract separately with the auditor, and they help do that. A community size of independence, it's right on the cusp of whether or not you bring that in-house versus outsource. I understand the need for the CAFR statement builder if we're doing it all in-house. So one thing Cindy and I are looking at is, well, first of all, we actually haven't asked our auditor. So Chester, surprise, we'd be interested in having you take a look at this. I don't have any idea if that's even a correct number, but it's what I've spent in the past at other cities. What we'd like to do is not implement it this year, but to do a parallel to make sure that it's really working correctly, and then go live on it for our 2022 software. So I'd like to work with our auditors a little bit just to make sure that we're not putting this in place where it may not make sense to do so. I might stop there because this is a break kind of between the financial modules and HR modules to see if there's any questions about the actual financial modules.
Mr. Kidney, I'm just looking at the single audit report. A number of deficiencies were noted, and one of them was a material weakness, I should say, and that regards the customer deposits were not being entered on the general ledger, but only on the utility billing system. Which portion of what you just presented would address that material weakness? Would it be on the first slide?
Well, actually, that we've already addressed that. They are being entered on the general ledger. So that was more of we were keeping track of it separately. So that was more of a just a process issue. Now that what is still outstanding is that to happen automatically, and that would be part of the cash management module.
Okay, so it's not happening automatically yet. And so where you have cash management, we need to upgrade Munis for 5,000 to 10,000.
Well, I think
that. Go ahead.
Yeah, we would need to upgrade Munis. We'd have to coordinate the upgrade with payroll, and we need to do some additional training, and hopefully bring somebody in to help us actually take care of that. But I'll say the material weakness portion of your comment there, that's no longer that was taken care of before the end of the year. So that process, that was a process.
I know that, but yeah, but that was we had to do a corrective entry of $1.8 million. I mean, I don't ever want to see such a corrective entry have to be made again. So I'm most anxious about getting that automated system in place. And so when you say it will take between $5,000 and $10,000, surely that's not for all the things you say we need to do. training and upgrade the munis and coordinate with payroll? I mean, how much total will it cost for us to have that automated entry?
I would say bringing in someone for $5,000 to $10,000, but the timing wise is what takes the time. The upgrading munis, basically everyone has to get out of munis. There's a lot of coordination with that. It's more of a time issue than it is for the dollar issue. Now, the additional training that it would take, again, we're turning back some of the applications that we're not using, so we have training credit. So there shouldn't be a more cost associated with the additional training. It's just more of the bringing somebody in to help us wrap that up and get that implemented.
So is this the one that is going to take a year to get it done?
No.
Okay.
No, I
How
would
soon can
say
we get it done?
Cindy, you're gonna have to help me here on this one on the upgrades. I'm just offhand, I'm thinking probably the spring.
Very potentially this spring. I was hoping to get an answer from Munis because they are scheduled out on these upgrades. So it's probably going to be at least late first quarter to second quarter. But to talk to the integration for the CIS system and Munis to talk, there'll have to be an interface that'll have to be programmed in order for all of that to happen automatically. And in order to do that, there's programmers from both the CIS system and Munis that have to work together to get things written so it can talk to each other. So that will take some time.
And so in the meantime, assume it's going to be the second quarter. In the meantime, how often rather are the entries made? I just don't want to have a $1.82 million adjustment again. I want to know that they're happening regularly.
Yeah, they do happen regularly.
Yes,
How often
every month.
is that?
It's every month as part of the bank reconciliation.
Yes.
Okay. And the second question I had was, are we still preparing financial statements partially by spreadsheets created manually by the staff? That was significant deficiency number 3. And
I'm not sure that
that cash management tooth issue also.
I wouldn't say that producing financial statements in a spreadsheet was a deficiency. I believe the comment was there are a lot of remaining financial modules left to be implemented, and the recommendation would be to get these implemented. But getting back to the producing the financial statements, we're able to produce financial statements for departments, for pretty much anyone who asks specific financial questions. They want to pull up a report, take a look at it. What is taking more time and results in us having to do some spreadsheets is putting a report in place to show very concisely a budget to actual report. And that goes back to the chart of accounts was not set up to be able to run a report like that. And so it's been difficult to do the advanced reporting that it would take to be able to run that. So we do still prepare our monthly report that we produce for the citizens and produce for the governing body, the ones that are posted online. We do produce that spreadsheet because I feel that, to me, it was important to show it clean and easier to read than to just take the report that the system produces and put it up there. It would be a very confusing looking report, and I felt it was more important to have a report that people can easily understand. And so I am having my staff do that through a spreadsheet.
Well, I'm just looking at Mr. Moyer talked about a significant deficiency number 3. In July of 2018, when the city implemented Munis, the system was not set up to be used to prepare financial statements directly from the general ledger. Instead, the financial statements are prepared using information contained in the Munis system, plus information completed manually on spreadsheets by city staff. And the city staff anticipates completion of full implementation of Munis June 30th, 2021. And I remember having heart failure when I saw that date, because I did not think we should be doing spreadsheets after spending $5 million on a Munis system. And so my question is, which one of these steps can we take that will more quickly fully implement Munis so that we don't have to worry about another significant deficiency on our preparing of the financial statements?
Well, I guess I would need to talk to Chester a little bit when we're saying the fully implemented Munis. I have in front of you a report showing about 18 different products. Many of them.
And that's why I was curious on which one of these, like, is it the cash management that I should be most concerned about? I mean, we don't have an unlimited wallet, so we sort of have to prioritize.
Absolutely.
And I just don't know which is more important.
I would say they're all important to the user that wants the information out of it. Personally,
Sure.
I'm more concerned with the cash management out of any of these. So,
Well, Chester's here. Can Chester speak to it?
That was Mr. Hobart, for those who are not familiar with his voice yet.
oh, okay. Chester, would you mind if you or Kara may have a comment on this?
Sure. This is Chester talking. Thank you. I'll take the floor. The significant deficiency in the 2019-03 significant deficiency in the report, it is both broad towards all of these financial modules and recognizing the full implementation not taking place, because all of those things interact to create that CAFR financial statement. Specifically, the general ledger information, and I think I heard Brian say this, is done in a reporting fashion that's not designed when you press the button to say report. It doesn't create the CAFR. And that's probably along the lines of perhaps the CAFR builder, Brian. That might be part of it. So what's happening is and I think Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, I heard you say, from those reports that are generated from Munis, then that information is being done in a more readable format through spreadsheets to provide. And effectively the same thing would be happening with the city's CAFR that's prepared once a year, is that the information is being then converted into the format that is required to be presented in that CAFR format. Does that help? Or is there any clarification you'd like further?
You lost me, Chester.
Okay.
So let me throw this out there. So one software doesn't talk to another one.
Yeah, right. In short, there's a human interacting to move the information into the financial statements that are then being audited.
Is there a way to fix that with software, existing software, or do we have to build something from scratch?
So, Chester, I guess I would ask you, of your clients, how many use a CAFR reporting software?
For state and local governments, which would be the CAFR reporting governments, it does depend on their size. The larger the organization, the more likely it is. And the city would fit into that category, that it'd be more likely.
Okay.
So what's the solution though? Do we have to build something brand new, or do you have a product that exists to make this work?
We have the module, and that's partially this module, the cash management module, and then the CAFR module is what Mr. Moyer is speaking about.
So it's strictly our lack of implementing it that's causing the issue.
Yeah, I would say it was the lack of resources available to implement it quicker than what we're doing it.
And when you say resources, you mean people?
Yes. But I would say that I think we're getting to that point where we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. I would say when I came on board in the September, October of 18, it was pretty much a crisis management for the first year here. But I would say with, definitely with Cindy on board, getting payroll implemented, I think we're a much better place, and I think we're ready to get this stuff implemented.
Okay.
Any more questions about the financial modules?
No. Thank you.
You're welcome. The remaining HR modules, we have the talent manager. I believe that's just going to be some additional training and time management on our side. We could bring in somebody to get that going quicker. I would imagine that would be $15,000, $20,000, $25,000. I will say we do have a payroll manager position that's being recruited for right now. When that gets filled and that person's up and running and trained, we might be able to do some restructuring around and get this talent management portion up and running. I would say, again, talking anything to do with the audit, these wouldn't have any impact on audit or the internal controls. The talent management module basically tracks employees' training. So when an employee goes into this training, it basically keeps track of their history of training and also online training and things like that. It's just a way to keep track of that. And it has not been as high a priority, again, because it doesn't have direct impact to the financial statements. The recruiting is the same thing. This is the, basically it's a application that when a person applies for a job, or we push everything out through this software instead of having to re-key everything and recode it back on the internet. It's a very fluid, and so once a person's been hired through the recruiting module, it just comes into the payroll system and the talent management system very smoothly. So that's what that module does. It's the same thing. It's just, again, we're really focused on getting HR up and running and getting some people in place, and we're hoping to get this going with some additional training.
Mr. Kidney, when you mentioned a few times to reinstate the project manager,
Yeah.
payroll manager, things of that nature. How many people are we talking about? And don't we have a hiring freeze?
We do have a hiring
I'm
freeze.
confused.
No.
I'm so confused.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you knew. We do have a hiring freeze.
And so,
however, we were able to get a payroll manager position unfroze, if you will. And so now we are hiring for a payroll manager position. The project manager position is still frozen.
and is there a plan B? Assume we're not going to unfreeze the project manager. Is there a plan B for us to move forward with all these goals, not having a project manager?
Yes, our goal is to do it the way we're doing it now, is that we all have our primary job, and then we are also project managers for individual modules. So,
Gotcha.
say for instance, Cindy's the CFO. She's in charge of the finances and a lot of accounting. She has a lot of staff that she reports to or has reporting to her. But then also she's the project manager, if you will, of a couple of the modules.
Okay.
And so there's more modules than people. And if we had the project manager, as again, as Toma Perry was, he had the opportunity. That's what he did, was the project manager for all the modules.
Okay.
Now this is getting back to some questions that had come up earlier. I think Councilmember Hobart had mentioned this. This is the record keeping, and the first line here, first row is the execu-time, and basically that is automated timesheets, if you will. So our biggest issue that we're having right now is Munis is having difficulty themselves understanding execu-time. Execu-time was a new purchase for Munis. So execu-time used to be a standalone company. In fact, in previous places I've worked, we had execu-time as our automated timesheet. The difficulty is when Munis purchased execu-time, which happened just right at the same time that the city was purchasing the Munis software. Munis was purchasing this execu-time module, but it was a separate company. There was a disconnect, if you will, as I understand it. A lot of the execu-time staff didn't come over with Munis, and so the only execu-time implementations that were happening that Munis was doing were easy implementations, i.e.
Do we need to worry about that right now?
What?
Execu-time. I don't want to spend $50,000 if we still have to have manual spreadsheets. I mean, I've got to prioritize here.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure. There was just a lot of discussion about the timesheet issue. And so
yeah, I just want to make sure the firefighters and the cops are getting paid right.
Okay. So I would recommend
with the additional item of the IPL guys that have a potential for timesheet abuse.
Yeah. So our plan is to be very careful on moving forward with this module. So we have two things. So we're execu-time is not. We don't feel that they're going to be able to definitely do fire department union payrolls. It is, I would say, beyond their capability to use it and use it in a way that would be beneficial to the city. So we could implement it for, say, my department, and I think we could probably get it out in IPL, and I think that would help tremendously with IPL with these issues that we're talking about. However, but then, so if we don't use it, however, we can turn it back in and get credit. And for us, then we would go out and find a data collection device that would work for us. So that's kind of the decision point we're considering. We're not happy with Munis and their relationship with execu-time at all. But at the same time, we know we could use it for 70% of our departments, but in order to bring fire and police over, we would need to get something else. So we're in that place is like, do we want to spend the money here? And then we still need to go out and get, there's a software called Firehouse that works very well with fire department. So there's specialized software for that kind of data collection. And again, it's taking us some time to really get our arms around all of this.
Okay.
But I understand definitely your cost of quicker implementation. That's a high dollar amount. That advanced scheduling is very specific to fire department and to IPL. What that does is it allows the department head to go out and be very specific about the scheduling of that person's time out in the field. And so when on payroll day, they only need to look at any exception. So did that employee really, if that employee didn't come in at a certain time and clock in, then they get notice and they'll know right away and they'll be able to take care of it then instead of waiting 2 weeks for payroll week to happen. There's a lot of issues to work around. I know in other places, the whole idea of employees punching the time clock, I think is going to be a little problematic because that's not the culture here in all departments. So we're working on this, and we would like to work on this a little bit more and maybe bring something back to you in a month or two, talk about what our plan would be for this module.
Okay.
This is the last HR module one. Is there any other comments or questions about that?
Not from me.
Thank you. The last part, I want to talk a little bit just, first of all, I'll start with the bottom one, that Munis self-service. That's the, we have that solution already up in place. And so we're actively working with Munis to get a credit back, since we don't need that because we already have this solution out there. Transparency. This is what I wanted to implement when I first came here. I think I'd shared this other sites with you, Councilmember DeLucci, at one point. But we're starting to find out, especially right now, that our cybersecurity definitely needs to be upgraded before we start bringing on a lot of this online information. I think as soon as it is, we're ready with no additional cost to at least get our checkbook. So at any time a citizen can pull up and see how much we spend on a vendor, what it was spent on. It's a really powerful tool. I like it. I've actually used this. This is called Socrata. I've used it before. I think it's a really good one. Again, talking to other people, and in fact, talking with our auditors, there is some concern with that. The amount of people that are being hacked. In fact, I got a text right before I started doing my presentation. We had another fraud attempt against us on someone stealing checks and using our checks, presenting them at the bank. So we get fraud checks against on our system quite a bit, and we just want to make sure we're ready for this before we start putting people's information out there. So
Can you go back one or two about the CAFR statement builder?
Yeah.
What was, okay. So we already have it,
yes.
right? Okay. But it's not implemented.
I would
so if
say,
we're not going to use it, can we turn it back in and get a credit?
Cindy, wouldn't you say, I believe we're about 60% done with that?
Yes, that's correct. Nancy's been working on that as she's been going along. We could check with Munis to see if they would take it back as a credit, even though
Well, it's just, we're looking at spending even more money, but we already bought it. So I'm sitting there going, okay, I know on Monday's agenda is $2.4 million that we're being asked to spend for cybersecurity. And we've already spent $5 million, I think it's $5 million on Munis. And we're sitting here 2 years later, not having it implemented. I'm just so frustrated. Like Fisher Cup bait time. If we're going to buy something, let's use it. If we're not going to use it, I don't want to buy it. I mean, it's a real simple concept.
Okay. We have planned to go live with this. The specific question that I was tasked with, what would it take to speed it up? And that was the answer there. I think we'll be fine going live with it. I did kind of want to look at whether or not it may make better sense, both financial and quality control sense, to outsource this. But we're able to go live with this.
In June of 21 or now?
June of 21. Yeah, I mean, getting back to the ultimate, the last question you'd asked me is, I had said that we'd be ready for June of 21 of these.
You said we would be ready. I said I wanted it before June of 21.
Right. So the question was, Mr. Kidney, when do you believe this will be implemented? And my answer was June of 21. You said it was not acceptable.
Correct.
Please tell me what it would take to move up the implementation, and that's what this presentation is.
But I'm still hearing spring of next year, which I guess is not June.
It's
I
March.
guess it's March.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
No.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chester.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. We'll check out now, Kara, and I will.
Kara, thank
Appreciate
you.
your
Nice to
time.
meet you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Monthly financial operating reports. We got June, and then today I got May because we weren't supposed to get June yet. So I guess we're going to be looking at May.
Do you have any questions about May?
Well, there was one I had on June. There was a big number for miscellaneous revenue. It was like over a $2 million number. I think it was IPL. And I think you and I, Brian, talked about it a little bit because it was a fairly big number. And I just thought the term miscellaneous revenue was too broad. And I thought we were going to do something different with it, but maybe just too soon to do it. That was just a conversation we had a few weeks ago, I think.
No, that's good. And I appreciate that because that was, I've directed my staff beginning on July 1st to break down those revenues better. And so,
thank you very much.
Actually, this report was the one that you and I have already looked at.
Okay.
That had that miscellaneous. Yes.
Yeah. And it was like, whoa, that's a big number.
The miscellaneous, I know this answer, but I'm drawing a blank. Cindy, can you have I'll tell you what, if we keep going, I know that a couple other accountants are watching this, and I'm wondering if one of them give me a text to remind me what that miscellaneous revenue on IPL was, because I asked them specifically about that. But now I'm drawing. For some reason, my mind's a little tired right now.
Yeah. Well, it's been 2 hours. And so I'm looking at the license surcharge page. It's page 13 on the May statement, and it shows 1.2 million in license surcharge. We really have that much money in the license surcharge fund?
Yeah, actually we do. You had made that comment that there's no way we could have that, but we actually do.
Who's in charge of that? Is that you? Is that?
Well, ultimately, I think I'm responsible for the treasury of the city. Budgetary wise, I believe this was within Public Works. I think Community Development worked with them a little bit. There is a specific project coming up that this money is to be used for. And I know Adam's on.
I didn't see that. Okay.
Yeah. So this money is meant to be spent. I mean, obviously that's a good chunk of change. There's a road project that's being considered that would use quite a bit of this.
Okay, I guess I will ask the city manager that, because this sheet just shows it's unassigned. It's just sitting there, which.
Well, unassigned, again, for accounting purposes could mean quite a few things. It's unassigned in that it could be used for other street projects, but it couldn't be used for police, or it couldn't be used for something that the tax or the fees were not meant for. So the fees were meant for the street improvements, but not a very specific street. And so that's where that unassigned comes from.
Okay. How's the use tax money coming in, Brian?
The last I heard, I got an update from our accountant. It is coming in well. Let's see. Let me go to the table of contents.
I just use tax page.
Yeah, I've got it right here. So the animal shelter portion through May is 478,000. Well, and that would be the same for the police too then. So that is trending higher than I believe that we expected.
And is the money being used now or not yet?
It looks at, yes, there are some expenditures. In May, there was $46,000 used. And police, no, because again, the police is to be used for new personnel. But I believe there's a rule that it has to be at a certain point within the general fund, and then this would be used. But yeah, it does appear that expenses are starting in the animal shelter fund.
And I notice on page 15, IPL is still the 90-day reserve, but in the future, we're going to break it down, or we're not breaking it down, or is Adam still on the line?
No, the June reports actually do have it broken down between, it has a 63-day, and then it'll have a 27-day. It breaks those two apart. We'd actually presented that to UAB yesterday.
Can you ballpark? I can't remember 63 days. What was that? Do you remember? I tried to listen, but
of the IPL.
Yeah, of the 34.7 million, the 90 days, how much was both? How much was 63 days and how much was 27 days?
34.
If you have it.
Oh, wait a minute. I believe it's 63 is like 24 million, I want to say.
Okay. Ballpark, I know it's a ballpark. And the rest would be the 27-day, okay. Are you going to be doing that in the future with water too?
Yes, all three utilities have that broke down.
Okay. Also yesterday, in the PUAB, I know they talked about paying down on the bonds.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe we can pay early on any of our bonds. Am I right on that?
Yeah, that was my answer yesterday.
Or can we pay?
Yeah.
Okay. I had to keep leaving the room to do
sure.
other things. That meeting went on just like this one is. I'm sorry.
So I would
Okay.
say
If
that
I can, Mr. Kidney, if I can break in for a second, this is Dan Hobart. Listening to the PAB yesterday and just out of general knowledge, bonds are an investment vehicle that private individuals make. It violates the terms of the bond if you pay them off early. That's what the info was on the PAB yesterday, and I think that's pretty commonly known.
yes, so we do have some debt that has a call feature. Well, all of our debt has call features.
Yeah.
One of our outstanding utility bonds does have a call feature that will be triggered here shortly. I think I think it might be March of next year. So that we're getting pretty close to that. We can either do, there's different ways we can get around that. We have just started a relationship with public finance, PFM, Public Finance Management, and we're doing a kickoff with them, and they're ready. They're going to present to us how those refundings look like, and we'll be presenting those, I believe, shortly. I think it's a September UAB board meeting, but if it looks like it's better to refund those earlier, we might speed that up.
Okay.
One of my accountants texted me, if I can go back, the miscellaneous operating revenue, that's basically any revenue that's not directly a revenue of charges for services. So it'll have shut-offs, disconnects, reconnects, and then sell fixed assets, damage claims, those things in there. So again, starting with our July 1st, you'll get a better breakdown on those.
Okay. Okay. Do you have any other questions, Dan? No? I don't have any more questions, Brian. I did want to talk a little bit, but John Perkins had to leave. I'm going to ask our committee to come up with ideas on our next audit for the auditor. I'm thinking I'd love to have an audit of the police department. Not that I think there's anything wrong. I don't know how many uniformed officers we have. I don't know what equipment we have. I heard we only have a few, like 15 or 16 face shields or something low like that. I'd like to do an inventory of that type of thing. But then I understand perhaps we should also take a look at the fire department. And then someone else said, what about the overtime issue? Because we have a lot of employees putting in a lot of overtime, and maybe we need to take a look at that. And I know the city manager mentioned to me that he wanted to have an audit of our fleet. So there's lots of work to do. We just have to figure out what our priorities are and ask our auditor to do some more audits for us. So that's going to be our assignment for next month. Assignment on, and Mr. Kidney, you're right in the middle of it. Mr. Norris, you're in the middle of it. I mean, your ideas are certainly welcome also. And that's true of anybody, really, anybody listening to this. Send us your ideas on what you'd like to see audited by the city right now. Is there anything else to come before us? I know everybody's tired. I thank you. Mr. Kidney, I thank you. Mr. Norris, I thank you. Becky, as always, thank you for all your work. Mr. Hobart, thanks. I guess we're done, guys.
Thank you all very much.
Do I have a motion to recess?
Motion to recess.
We're done. Thank you. I'm exhausted.